Hi, everyone. We are back with another episode of Crafty Source Up. Now, today I've got two of my friends all the way from Europe joining us. I will let you know their names in a bit. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that we often in talent acquisition talk about what makes us good sourcers. Whether it's our analytical mind or is it our resilience to keep going no matter how many rabbit holes we kind of fall into, right? But we also want to talk about, do our tools make us better sources, or actually does it make us more reliant on them than we actually need to be? So today I'm joined by two of my friends from our sourcing community all the way from Europe to chat about just that. We're going to also explore firsthand accounts of the tools that have elevated the way their teams find top talent, discussing the specific challenges that they've addressed and the impact on their business and sourcing strategy. Plus, we're going to also unpack how company size may possibly influence sourcing strategies and also ask for some of the expert advice for anyone in TA looking to refine their approach. So let's get into it and let's get crafty. My two friends, Joey and Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know it's been a while. We've been going back and forth around getting this finally together. So I'm so glad that, we were able to get on here and actually finally have this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into it, gents, quick intros for those that do not know you all, and I'm sure most people do. But Joey, let's kick off with you first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Koksal. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm a recruiter slash sourcer hybrid. Been really in recruitment since 2005 and a sourcer, proper sourcer since 2014 and 15 times. And currently I am leading a talent acquisition team at EVBox based in Amsterdam for globally. It's Joey.
Thanks, Joey. Miguel, you?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Miguel Mayorga. I'm based in Nuremberg, southern Germany, in Bavaria. I've been in sourcing for some years. I think I started around like where I was actually getting paid for it in 2019, if I'm correct. And since then, I've been seeing quite some environments within large metrics firms from a global perspective, but also on a regional high volume sourcing perspective. And it's still thrilling until today. So I'm really happy that we had the chance to connect via Sourcing Summit and the general sourcing community. And that's how we all, I think, we met up. And I'm really, really, really glad for my, I would say, first sourcing manager at Adidas, Vivek Yoti, who gave me the chance to go to Sourcing Summit and meet so many like-minded people. And yeah, shout out to Phil in this matter. And yeah, glad to be here with you guys.
Awesome. And we are going to be back with Sourcing Summit, I believe, in October for Amsterdam and Sydney in June or July. And I know Germany is May, isn't it? I'm pretty sure.
It is May. Yeah.
It's pretty May. Awesome. And for those that are listening, Joey and Miguel, and I totally forgot that Joey does it too, but they both actually play some fantastic instruments. Can you all just give us a little background on what it is you'll like doing on the side?
Here, that's yeah. So I used to play in rock bands and various bands for the past 16 to 17 years. And basically that kind of thing, working with a band, also doing the managing side of things. So also uncovering contacts from A&R managers, booking agents, and so on. That's somehow also shaped or laid the groundwork for somehow eventually ending up in talent acquisition and more precisely in talent research and sourcing.
Well, we can source anyone everywhere, right? That's the beauty of being in sourcing, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, unlike with Miguel, I got my strut here as well. You can't see it properly. I got my Fender strut.
I do. Nice.
Yeah, I'm more like I play with the bands, but I'm more like a studio guitar player. And I used to play back in 2000 and play for famous people for demo records and stuff in the past. But I can't play it like I used to be. I got a little bit of carpal tunnel syndrome in my hands. So that struggle, but I still love the tune. I still love rock and roll sometimes. So
Nice.
I guess we're going to have like a little mini sourcing concert online where we get everyone in different parts of the geography. Like Mark can do the singing, y'all can play the instruments. I don't know what I'll do. I'll probably just try and sing if I can, but I'm pretty sure it will be a hit. We can give it a try. Who knows?
It's about the passion, definitely.
There you go.
from the heart, from the heart.
I'm definitely a good bathroom singer, but that's as far as my singing goes. So, guys, yeah. All right. Now, gents, we've been in the sourcing or even in the recruitment community for a while. I love asking these questions because I feel like sourcing has evolved, drastically over the years. And putting AI aside, it's just evolved in general. So, with y'all's experience individually, what do you think defines or makes you or anyone a good sourcer?
Well, is it quite a broad question? There's a lot of things. I mean, I don't want to talk about AI now, but maybe we'll get into it. To me, there's two important things as the good sourcer. One is effort, and second one is intellectual curiosity, because that will really make those two items will make a great sourcer. Because there's no one way of doing things. There's no such a best search string. There's no such a best platform. There's no such a great Boolean. It's all about effort and intellectual curiosity. Make it more and more. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I like to emphasize on the part that you just mentioned with regarding taking significant effort. I think that's something really, really undervalued and also misunderstood from a lot of people working in this space, because sometimes they just like throw a bunch of job titles into whatever, like LinkedIn Recruiter, and then they somehow magical find their relevant talent, and that's not it. And I think when we go to later questions, I think we can dive on the topic of like how this personally for me has shaped, for example, regarding tools and so on. But when it comes to what makes a good talent research, source, or recruiter, basically, also as Joey has mentioned, curiosity. This space has so much beyond like just finding profiles. You have the potential to look in various industries, various job titles, functions, and tools, and in anything that you can learn about. So if you're curious about something or have an intrinsic motivation to learn a lot, growth mindset, then just that's definitely a space for you. And what I also like as a third point is working and having emotion intelligence. At the end of the day, we're working with people, with like human beings that have a life in their background, and not just this kind of just digital profile that we're looking at. They're at the end of the day human beings that we also have to care for, and that's also coming with the advocacy for the talent, right? When we're, for example, talking to hiring managers and so on. And last but not least, as a fourth point, is data literacy. Still today, having so many conversations with recruiter sources as well as with hiring managers that still tend to rely on their gut feelings. I mean, sometimes it's like not really important. We can use that. But when it comes to critical questions and like critical decisions, especially when we're dealing with human beings, I would have a sophisticated and holistic approach to data and use that instead of just relying on my gut feeling, because that I can really rely on that. I mean, we're biased, we're human beings, that's part of human nature, but having more sophisticated data at your hand that backs up your story is, I think, the way to go.
And I think you'll make a very valid point around everything leading back to curiosity, right? Because even to be data literate or even interested in that sort of concept, you have to be curious. Where are you going to go to find that data? How are you going to dig deeper into that data? If I take my own example, when I started tech recruiting, I started with SAP, right? SAP is a massive industry. And when I think about 10, 15 years ago, I didn't even know what the hell SAP meant. So I had no one to guide me, no one to teach me what SAP was, how I can actually source, how I can recruit in that. Google became my best friend. So it was that innate sort of curiosity behind me to be like, okay, I love talking to people. I was in HR before that. I was like, I don't want to hire and fire people, but I definitely want to recruit people. And I think that's what led to my curiosity to be like, okay, if I'm going to go into tech recruiting, what is that tech recruiting going to look like? So you'll make very valid points around that sort of curiosity. And I think the one thing I bang on about sourcing is that there's no right way or wrong way about doing it. And Joey, you sort of mentioned that with your point around, there's no right tool, there's no wrong tool. It's just about being curious and putting in the effort to actually spend time to know more about, the role that you're in. If you have that sort of, passion for it, there are people that don't enjoy sourcing because it's not the easy way out. You've got to keep going down rabbit holes to find your way out of that in a way, if that makes sense. So thanks so much for sharing that. Let's talk a little about sourcing tools, right? And we use it a lot. We all use it. Is it the unsung hero or maybe not? We usually tend to use tools for niche, complex roles. Let's talk about when you each were brought on as a sourcer in your own respective companies. What problems were you solving for the business, and what tools were you using to actually help you all get to where you all needed to get to?
Wow. How many of them? I don't remember. It's countless situations. I just want to step back. Is one of the most important thing was for me, every time I go for a sourcing assignment back in 2016 and 17, I always want to talk to business because there was a blockage from the recruiters. Here it is. This is the job description. This is what we're looking for. And can you find us people? I said, it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry. You can do it yourself on the various platforms. But I said, I need to talk to business. They said, why? Because I want to create a persona. I want to understand that because sourcing is not just about finding the perfect person, because to be able to make that perfect, we need that data, like Miguel mentioned that. I need to understand not just about the soft skills and hard skills. I want to understand the sector. I want to understand the areas. I want to understand the old way through the what you're looking for within your team, the culture and everything. Because when I try to reach out, I will create some sourcing strategy around that. And I always go before to my meetings with some market research. As I said them, guys, you're looking for this person for this level, but have a look at the market segment, which is, did you see the demand against the supplier? Are you aware of this? What we're looking for? Are you aware of how long it's going to take? Like data is crucial for me before I go to my clients, and also it's important to get the right data from my clients as well. To combine it will be a killer, and we'll get there. So, I used to use a lot of different platforms. Of course, LinkedIn, one of them. Let's not deny that. We used to use that. Well, I like X-Ray. I always like X-Ray. X-Ray give us a totally different results, and not just in Google and in different areas as well, such as if you use Brave, the Bing, different also browsers helps you and bring the different people into your talent pool, basically. And I was falling in love with it. If you guys remember it, machine sourcing. Do you remember machine sourcing? Wow, that was the best kind of Google, something related to Google. I remember it. I never forget that. You open your LinkedIn or LinkedIn Recruiter, and then literally you put your requirements on it, put your Boolean, everything on it. It searches itself. It's like a machine learning. And then that brings you to all the people you're looking for. And then you can download it straight away. Those days, you didn't have to worry about that kind of GDPR and stuff, and you don't keep them. Yeah, Hire Reviews, amazing hire. I used to use their platform, definitely. That was Recruitum. But those days back in 2015 was good, but X-Ray was my among the best way of sourcing people.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of interesting things you've just mentioned regarding tooling. And I also, when I heard about this question, I thought like, how did it actually change for me over the couple of years? And you know what? When I started going into this kind of field and also going to sourcing summits and also various yeah classes of Irina, I always wanted to have the latest gadgets back then when I started, but that really changed. Today, I'm rarely using any kind of like scraping tools or whatever. I think because my main research methodology or strategy has changed for the better. I'm more strategic in my initial approach first, and then the execution becomes lighter, not relying so much on any kind of like Chrome extensions or whatever. I mean, I still have them, but I'm not really using them anymore. And I think doing your research, your pre-research before you go into a strategy meeting, for example. Do you know anything about this function? Do you anything about this role or this industry or the telemarketing? If you do not, then you should do your research. Become prepared and then enrich that with the insights gathered from, for example, this specific function hiring manager. And then, okay, now we lay both things on top. This is how the tele landscape in this particular region is looking like. That's the distribution on skills, for example, that are associated with it, the most common like. Anything else? And then you build or refine your strategy, your sourcing strategy, and then you execute it. And I think most often people just jump right into it, throw a bunch of company titles, job titles, but never really understood first what they're actually looking for, what the actual industry has shaped or how it's currently looking like, and the general distribution of talents, and really just looking for the top level talent, like which are on the surface, rather than really getting an understanding of, for example, where does this people actually meet up? Like, for where are they located? Where do they share their knowledge? For example, a special platform, anything else. So nowadays, I use tools like Rocket Reach or SalesQL for uncovering the mail addresses. I mean, for company addresses, they most have a standardized mail format, so good for figuring that stuff out. But if you also want to go into personal addresses, that's one way that you can do, but also having in mind GDPR compliances and so on. But guess what? This oftentimes works way better than doing a LinkedIn mail because people really get fed up with it. But if you write a concise, personal, crafted mail, because everyone has a personal mail address, they get back to me, and then I start initiating the actual conversation. So yeah, that's my approach. Getting a good understanding on the market, on the function, on the role, tools or technology that's relevant, having that kind of understanding, and then going to the assignment. It really depends on what they want to uncover. Is it more general insights, or is it really just finding some profiles that are relevant to the role? Like, really, what kind of challenge do they want to solve, and then we can provide, um, yeah, the kind of information. Also, since Joey mentioned Hire Easy, each platform has its own unique value, and you really want to make sure that you use the tools and platforms in relation or in relevance to what you're actually looking for. If I'm looking for a really niche tech talent, I probably wouldn't recommend going for LinkedIn. I mean, there are some relevant profiles out there, but if you go for, I don't know, in R&D within ophthalmic, you probably wouldn't go for LinkedIn. You would go for like a research driven platform, maybe like Scholar or anything like that. So yeah, having that in mind and also going for the curiosity.
I love every point that you're saying because it validates a lot of my own thought processes around how I like to operate and how I know a lot of other sources and recruiters also operate. One question back that actually came to me while you and Joey were speaking about the data and insights part, because it's extremely important to know what your historical data should look like as well. So jumping back into that, what happens with people who don't have a budget for LinkedIn talent insights and stuff like that? Where can they go? How can they find data to support what they or validate what already their thought process is. So let's say if I'm working on a role and the minute the hiring manager's already said to me, this is a unicorn, but I don't have the tools, or the company doesn't have the tools to invest in talent insights, where else can sourcing people or recruiters find this sort of intel to be like, I need to support and back myself up now that I know this is going to be a pain in the ass?
I mean, there are statistical sites out there from, I'm not sure quite from the name, but the Federal Bureau of
In the
Labor
US,
Statistics,
yeah.
for example. There are similar things around that in Europe, in Germany, particular countries where you can aggregate work related data. When it comes to talent data, especially when you might end up with going for like a full-on service like LinkedIn Insights or so on, because they have to keep their data under wrap, and so they're not sharing that publicly. Um, you could also go for like doing some open research in, for example, some reports that are publicly available data. You could also use X-ray. I did that I think for a role in Malaysia some time ago, where I really looked those kind of things up, and then I had the companies within this kind of sector listed, which are mostly located there. For example, the how many employees are over there. Or if you talk about, for example, medical devices, there's the Medical Devices Europe, if I'm correct. That's how they always present a report regarding talent distribution, company distribution, regulation stuff, and so you can get this kind of information. But if you really want to have like information regarding talents for a specific company and so on, you might end up. You don't have to, but you might end up with some kind of tool. But even if you don't have a license, you could still use LinkedIn. I mean, there are so many functions and filters which you can use in order to see how many people, for example, are working at Apple right now or at a certain company. Sure, you also have to back check if it's the real employee count or not. But for example, regarding subsidiaries, if you go to the company page and if you click on employee, sometimes also the subsidiaries might be listed or the companies associated with this kind of company and so on. And even if you have just the lowest tier premium from LinkedIn, to a vast amount of, I think so, if I'm correct, unlimited searches, which already give you high advantage in uncovering talent, in not going for like a 8,000 euro
Yeah.
license per
Yeah.
month,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
And you can still filter, like if you go to Apple, you can still filter, I think, by titles as well. If you're looking for, see
exactly,
how many people,
exactly.
software engineers over there. Yeah. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little about company size, right? So sourcing strategies often require some form of customization to meet business needs effectively. And it's clear that what works for one org may not work for another company, especially considering, there are a lot of differences in scale, in build. And, with that in mind, do you think, in your experience, does company size actually impact what your sourcing strategy could possibly look like?
I don't think so. I don't. From my side, it doesn't really matter because we're looking for individuals. Okay, but the culture, fit in the team, and everything. How what makes it different? The product and industry, not the size of the company. Because not every fintech, software engineers would like to work in a fashion area or pharmaceutical. So that makes it so different. It's really really tough to make sure our employer branding is top notch to be able to reach out to people to bring them in. If we don't get this right, I mean, I think I talk about back in 2000, I don't remember when did I talk to Social 2 years ago, I think, right, Miguel? I made a chart, related to what we discussed before. I create the how to find demand and kind of details data from the the market. I used to use my own previous sourcing and create the market report. I use Talent Neuron. I use LinkedIn Insights, of course, and also there's a very good company in London. They do great job. It's called Horsefly.
Horsefly? Yes.
Yeah. So they do that as well. Just putting it all together, you can create your own one. There's so much free information on the system. I use Data Explorer, and that helps me out a lot for the regions, country, including the cities as well. Depends on the tech stack you're looking for from technical recruitment. But going back to your question, size really doesn't matter. Sounds very dodgy what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, it's about your product and your employee branding is the key. Really, your culture makes it different from my
I love what you said about the employer branding part. And I think, when you think about 5 years ago, a lot of employer branding professionals were talking very heavily about the reliance on employer branding and recruitment marketing. And I think moving into 2024, at least with what I'm seeing over here in Australia, employer branding is top. It's probably the most important thing that you can rely on more than anything right now. So you make a very valid point around that. Miguel, what do you think?
So regarding sourcing strategies, I wouldn't say it's. I would agree with what Joey said. I think you can get to talent or relevant people without mattering or without focusing generally on the company size. But what I found it probably challenge or different to, for example, a smaller size firm is when it comes to funding. I mean, both larger firms as well as with smaller size companies, they both have their pros and cons when it comes to funding. But generally, I would say a larger firm per se might have it easier to fund for like a tool, but sometimes also it's challenging or more challenging because for them it would cost like, I don't know, 500,000 instead for a small firm maybe just paying like 10,000. I mean, the numbers might vary different. And processes, definitely. I mean, I've been working for larger firms in the past years, and that's definitely something that could be a challenge for sourcing or TA people because getting something approved and you need it actually by next week, but it will take 1 year, 2 years after it has been evaluated and also then implemented, and then for you to actually getting it started. And what I also want to highlight is the general value of talent acquisition. Not sure how it's within the startup environment, but when speaking about larger firms, still today they seem to be undervalued or as part of HR, just like a smaller subset that brings us talent and do that, like screen CVs, and that's it. But the overarching strategic value that talent acquisition has in combination with employer branding. I mean, these people are actually one of the first when it comes to talking to potential employees, which could shape the company's future. And employer branding as well, like they're right at the forefront. And if a company in general doesn't really think or does think that this doesn't really matter, then it will reflect in how they hire. For example, will they get back to their talent right in time? Like after they apply, they have for example, initial call in the very first week, or does it take 2 months after they got an update, right? Or how the transition process. I mean, the transition process after a person was hired to actually become an employee, oftentimes a lot of hiccups happen right there at this intersection. And that's, I think, just a reflection on how a company really sees this kind of particular work. And if we really just ask a hiring manager, how important is this process to you? How much time will you commit like doing and actually solving this role, because this role is under your belt, and getting a perspective more from on a strategic level, and then bringing it down to the operational. And you, I mean, changing things from the bottom up, you can do that. But if you talk to a lot of recruiting people, TA, sourcing folks out there, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort for this educational process to really be understood correctly. And then, but if it's already from on the top, like understood, like how TA, how recruitment, employer branding does actually shape our company, our awareness. If that's already understood, then I think that the things get a bit easier, no matter the company size.
You'll both make very, very good points. And I can see both sides because having been in startups now and also in large enterprises, employer branding, I guess, is extremely crucial. But one thing that I've seen with startups, and Miguel, you just pointed that out, is if you undervalue recruitment or recruitment best practice or what hiring should look like, and you don't get that right from the start, you're basically building a product without having the right mind frame in place. And what I mean by that is that you need the right people to be building out that product. And if you're not thinking about the people, not as an employee, but people that are going to be talking about your product, even if they have just gone through your process, that's your employer branding. They are the ones who are going to be talking about you in the long run, not just your employees. And I think that a lot of people, especially at startup level, tend to forget about that if they don't have their hiring pat down, or if they haven't even thought about, hey, our hiring should actually look like this. It should not be about we're only hiring for these roles now. What is our long-term game? Because employer branding is pretty much 80% of your hiring in your startups, right? Because you're small. You're not scaling that big as well. With the task of sort of selecting tools, right? What do you think are the pros and cons? Because I'd imagine in y'all's role, y'all have had to, do UAT, go through some of the tools that y'all have had to sit with your teams and select. What are the pros and cons of selecting some of the sourcing tools y'all have had to work with?
So pros and cons, yeah, I always had a license for at least one platform. I never had the issue to actually crave for something that I can actually do my work. I always had that. I always had for example, a German speaking market. It's Xing. That's where I basically started. Then I had a LinkedIn recruiter license always. Then also from time to time I had in addition to that, LinkedIn Insights tool. So to get more like general telemarket insights, and then also do more on the X-ray side. So that's basically for free, and then you can find your own way in how you uncover talent. So when it comes to pros and cons, as I already mentioned, it depends on what you want to uncover. If that site, for example, piracy for me per se, it's more relevant when I go to the US market, for example, when compared to European. It's also better when looking at tech folks. If I look on the German speaking market, I barely can use it. The information is not correct. But if you look on Xing, for example, which is highly dominant for the German speaking market, it's more relevant basically. And LinkedIn has benefits for both sites, sort of say, but still, I wouldn't use it as as a standalone thing, right? I would also look for, okay, in every case, where can I gather talent market insights that not so that I don't really rely on just one side of the things, because that's how we end up with just looking on one side of the coin. I also want to look on other feeds, especially when we're looking for specialized niche talent. What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, I agree with you what you're saying. It's about there's so many of them for so many different talents. I totally agree with you. I mean, is really looking at it. For example, if you're looking for, I'll give you an example. If you're looking for UX UI designer, yeah, you can find LinkedIn. You can do some X-rays, but the best place where you find those people,
Dribble,
you need to get that one right. Like Dribble, Ants, Kegel,
Behance.
these are the best. best place to looking into it. So you need to get that. This is why I said intellectual curiosity, not just a curiosity. Intellectual is about doing your due diligence in advance. Oh yeah, I know, because you're a sourcer. You need to understand that. You're never going to look at, finance guys in the behance. You're going to find right people, or you're never going to find it. You're never going to find the finance people in GitHub, for example. You know what I mean? Maybe if they're really interested in, open source, those kind of things. But you need to have the intellectual to understand that divided your strategy in the beginning. This is where you come in the fundamental quality as a source of what you do. Oh, finance people, which will go down there. I wouldn't say it's just all of them is good. All of them is good. It gives you so many results. On the other hand, I would say create your persona appropriately and create your strategy with your string, with the hard skill, soft skills, everything in a more specific, so that will give you less numbers.
Exactly. And you've got to find a tool that works for you
Yeah, exactly.
at the same time.
That's one. Yeah, it has to work for you. Absolutely. Yeah.
And Joy, you touched on persona, and I think it's a very important thing, because if you don't know, if you don't peel back the onion layers and really understand at the crux of what you're hiring for, to what both you and Miguel said, we are all just going to go into LinkedIn Recruiter, put a couple of job titles, hoping for the best candidates to pop in, and then we end up with mediocre results, right? And that's what always happens. There was a LinkedIn Live that we ran this week. I don't know if you'll know of Ashfaq Ahmad, but he's been talking to Irina quite a bit. And one thing he talks about is data slicing. So he uses big data concepts to source. And his idea is that you have to understand, first of all, you have to become niche in your area as a sourcer or a recruiter. So if you're a tech recruiter, then you need to specialize in that area, because that will give you a much better understanding of what your persona is. And to a large extent, I actually agree with him. So if you'll get a chance, absolutely watch that, because he does a whole demo of data slicing and how you can actually understand what your persona looks like. One is the persona that the hiring manager tells us, but he talks about it from a candidate flip side. So how does the candidate really talk about themselves in tech jargon ways, or just in a normal sort of candidate spotlight way? How do they actually describe themselves? So really thinking from a candidate's point of view as well. So that just sort of reminded me of that. Last question for me, and then, I'll shut up after that. Any advice to anyone in TA that is looking to sharpen their sourcing toolkit, their mindset? I know we want to be, put in effort, be curious. Anything else, Joey Miguel? Go nuts.
Well, I'm going to look at it from a different perspective, okay? Because sourcing ain't easy and undervalued and misunderstood generally from TA leaders. I got to admit that, okay? I understand the reason, budget and the timing, but I tell you this, finding a one Golang developer in Europe, you need to search up to 500 people, engage with up to 200 people to get one bloody hire. That takes 250 between 500 hours. Okay. This is my own data tells me, but that was when I was really working as a consultant. So therefore, what I would say to any talent acquisition or sourcer out there, make your not time management, your task management correct. There's a difference between time management and task management. Task management is just really prioritize what you need first. Getting your data, getting your persona, and then you start your sourcing. But get this due diligence beforehand. Do your task management correctly. Your result will come a lot faster than if you cannot manage it in the first place. Because if you look at the in-house people, in-house tech recruiters, they are really juggling and they're really struggling with the internal processes. They don't have time to do source. Very limited time. 4 hours a week sourcing does not bring you anything. 20 hours of sourcing will bring you better result than 4 hours of your sourcing. So I would say really do your due diligence, prioritizing and task management.
What you just said, Joey, reminded me of a conversation I had last week where someone said to me, you're a sourcer, so that means they were like, I thought you're going to be making 100 calls a day. And I'm like, hold on. I'm like, that's not what sourcing does. So that I couldn't sleep the whole night because I was like, oh my God, is this what people think sourcing is? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's still just a junior recruiter role, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's very
But
funny. Apologies. Back in when you say that, I gotta explain it. Back in 2007, I was working a very well known. I don't want to agency, and one of my KPIs was 80 calls a day was my KPI. That was 2006. Internet was just becoming popular website. So you know what? This incompetencies, unfortunately, is going to be out there. This ignorance is going to be out there. So let's ignore it. Our result will make a difference and will answer those kind of incompetencies. So I
True,
did want to
true.
mention that.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Joey. Mr.
have
Mayorga.
three. Yes, I have three key elements that I think are highly valuable for anyone in talent acquisition, not just in sourcing. And I know, Joe, you don't want to talk about it anymore, but I want to mention here generative AI. Sure, it's often heard. I mean, since the publication of ChatGPT, probably anyone has already had at least one touch with that kind of tools, but get used to it, mess around with it, see what it can do for you, because at the end of the day, there's no magical playbook. The scientists in the lab, they're also just testing and seeing what this thing can do. They don't have a rule book where they know like this is what they can do. So you have to mess around with it. So and each of us can do that. And there's also no crystal ball out there what this kind of technology will do for us in the future. But being proactive and staying agile is highly crucial when it comes to this kind of technology. I mean, just by looking at what this kind of technology has done to so many industries, so many companies within the past year. I mean, there were a rise of companies around wrappers, so to say. So they relied on the ChatGPT API. Some of them became obsolete because OpenAI worked on their GPT, so they were no longer relevant, right? So be proactive, be agile, and know what this kind of technology can do for you. Use it, and yeah, use it to your advantage. Because there was a question of how many people were using AI or ChatGPT, and I think almost everyone in the room lifted their finger. And then the second question was like, how many of you are actually financially being supported by the company? Almost none. So that's how AI or technologies get implemented into companies. People use it, and I highly recommend checking out Ethan Mollick and his new upcoming book, Co-Intelligent, which is coming up in I think April 1st. Which I mean, he's on the forefront when it comes to AI and LLM technology and sharing that, and also in relation to education and shows best practices and use cases about it. So, having that in mind, becoming aggressively strategic, especially when technology is drastically shaping the landscape and impacting our not just our work but also our lives. I think having a strategic understanding of where your company is going in terms of skills, in terms of business, makes you an overall better talent acquisition professional. For example, when talking about a hiring manager's goals, like understanding what his goals are, what he's working towards, and lying that on like next to the market data, I think you can better navigate where you shift your talent acquisition strategy. Now, last but not least, and I can't emphasize that enough, be human. I mean, we all have seen those kind of lousy messages coming from even from TA recruiting folks that are just so impersonal, so like why? I mean, it's like I'm not interested in engineering or like I don't know roles that are not in relevance to my profile. If this person would have looked into my profile, they would have probably guessed that I'm not an engineer or whatever kind of role, like a pharmacist, whatever. But people should take the time, the effort, which Joey mentioned, the effort before actually reaching out to talent. Don't do mass mailing. Do your research upfront, make it good, and then figure out who's actually relevant to your role, and then then text just a few of them which are highly relevant. Rather, you can still expand to 20 to 50 or whatever if there are that enough talent out there. But make sure you're human, you're genuine, and you're authentic. And that's also plays in the factor of employer branding and your personal brand.
Um,
Go on, Joey.
apologies.
Sorry.
Just want to make one thing clear: is I'm not against AI or something like that. I thought
No.
big area. I love AI. I use a lot of AIs on that one as well. I think people scared of AI. I think AI is going to give us a different opportunities for future. It's going to give us a different areas for jobs and stuff. So, but there's nothing solid out there except interviewing. I see there's nothing solid out there for you can use for sourcing, which we already don't have. So, I love AI. Future will definitely add value to it. But, maybe one of the viewers can create something out the source in AI in a different level will be awesome going forward. That's a
Question to you guys. Question to you guys. Did you have somewhere in the past when using ChatGPT or any LLM, did you have some form of existential crisis while having that? So when I had it a couple of times when I realized, oh my gosh, this could potentially change and this could be potentially be impacted. And I was like really talking to my partner. Don't you get that? Like the kind of potential impact. And Ethan Malik said that in a recent interview. If you have this kind of feeling of an existential crisis while working with these kind of tools, I think then you're at a good spot. That getting what this kind of technology, and that's why everyone should use it. How did you both feel about this? Did you have some sort of feeling when using those kind of tools?
Oh, I was very, very intrigued by it for sure. I wasn't scared, but I was scared enough to be curious about it. If that makes sense. And I think to your point about what you just said is that when you get scared about it, there's two ways that can go. You're either going to run from it or you're going to run towards it. So I think I ran more towards it than running from it because I'm like, okay, look, if it's going to take my job, then I better bloody well understand how the heck it's going to take my job at some stage. Is it going to take my job now? What does that look like? And how can I have other skills that I can utilize if that was to happen? So I just started playing around with it. Like, I'm not scared. I wasn't scared of it to the fact where I was like, okay, I'm going to lose sleep over it. But I love new tech and I get very intrigued by it. And to your point, and I think, a follow on of that, and sorry, Joey, if I haven't given you a chance to say anything just yet. But I think following people like Hung Lee and all who are actually on top of these sort of conversations, Robin Choi is constantly on top of it. From an analytics space, Toby Culshaw, I know, Miguel, you're a massive fan of Toby. What he's doing. Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah. So following people like them and keeping abreast of what's happening, especially if you have an interest in what's happening in the AI space. If you don't have an interest, then I don't know, go do something else then. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
AI is phenomenal. I think is helping already so many areas. I'm not talking about just the recruitment. I saw AI merge with the metaverse that helping some mental issues like panic attack, anxiety. I think is phenomenal. It's going to make great jobs. But one thing comes to my question. When we work as an HR, not just talk about talent acquisition, HR, there's a human touch, right? What I mean by that, there's emotions, which AI doesn't have. And those emotions and values, the company does create the company culture. And I'm really wondering as AI driven and run by data end of the day, how can we merge those values and culture using AI to make things better for the people? That is a big question in my head, and I'm looking forward to hear from that.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with ethics, governance, and how those things get implemented. I mean, that's why ever we had also been hearing about those kind of stuff like automated decision making and stuff like that. These kind of things shouldn't happen when it comes to people. That's why we have really to make sure how it gets implemented is under, yeah, that it applies to law, it applies to culture, it applies to how we do business with people, especially within our field in HR. But we also shouldn't shy away, because if we were to do that at a slow pace, then we might be leaving out on this kind of big opportunity. But being aware of where the biases of the hiccups are and approaching it proactively rather than shying away. What are your thoughts?
And I think this is the reason why a lot of companies yet have not just jumped on the Gen AI bandwagon, because there's a lot of hesitation around the ethical side of things. There's a report that came out today, someone shared, and I'll share it with you all later, around how we can actually cull a lot of, like, as an example, with candidates using Gen AI as an example, because there's two sides to it, right? One is our side, the HR side of it, and then the candidate side of things as well. But you'll make a good point, and I think this is an evolving side of things where we'll just have to watch and see how that plays out. And I think till we are still in our roles, we can still play that critical role of making sure that that human element is still alive in it. And I guess from what Miguel was saying, yes, it comes down to the whole ethical compliance side of things, to just make sure that we stay on top of it as much as we can till we see changes are happening where the candidate experience, the emotions, all of it sort of come into play in a way where there is still that human element and human touch alive to some degree. And I think this is the thing that we're all most worried about, is that it won't be there. And I think, again, I go back to the fact that this is why a lot of companies are still very hesitant to understand how can we remove the sort of the biasness that might creep in. Because I remember when I was playing with ChatGPT, I put my picture up in there and I prompted it, right? And I said, tell me the gender. And it, based on my short hair, it said, you're a male. One small prime example. 2 or 3 weeks later, I put the same prompt in, and it changed its stance, saying, "Oh, I can't actually, I'm not biased and stuff like that, something like that." But these are just things that these models are being trained in the back end, so it is going to change. So that's just my short answer to it.
Yeah, I mean, it will definitely. I cannot imagine what AI is going to bring us in 5 years. I can't wait for it. I mean, today is, yeah, there are certain areas you cannot really involve because there's low involved in it, and then ethics, definitely that is human nature, and you can put these in the data, but it depends on which country, which culture, that makes it different. However, today, what I love about it is if I want to create a presentation, I just put the topics in my images. In 30 seconds, my presentation's ready. As a dyslexy, which is a neurodiversity person, this kind of things really helps me. I can do coding myself on the sourcing, no problem, so easy. But when it's come to creating, putting things together on the PowerPoint, that makes it really hard for me. And to me, that's why I call AI phenomenal. But other areas, we'll see what government legislation is going to come in. But also, end of the day, you're putting private data in there. If you not be careful, that could be read and could create a lot of issues.
So,
Yeah.
Samsung,
Yeah.
just a minor example.
Yeah, compliance is
Yeah.
we need to be very, very careful. I'm very hopeful for the future. It's going to help. Of course, it's going to change things. But hey, don't you remember when the Facebook social media come in? When my manager, I remember those days, we should use it for business. He said, this is for kids. And now is one of the biggest marketing tools. It's just that really, really enhancing the mindset and take it from there. it's hard to deal with the competency and ignorance. But hey, time will tell.
It's an evolving space, right? And I think we're all here to see how this evolves, hopefully for the betterment. So far, what we are seeing is definitely a lot more positive than the negatives. And even though, with data privacy being a concern, people are still using it, because they're seeing the positives that are coming out of it at the same time. But gents, we have come to time, and this has been a phenomenal discussion. And I think, we all can keep going. And Joy, you and I were saying we can talk for a whole month on employer branding and just everything else between them. I'm sure, Miguel, you can jump in on the same conversation. But look, I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for coming on the Crafty Saucer. And yeah, I will obviously catch you all in Amsterdam some stage.
Yeah, definitely. And
All right.
thank you for having us. Thank
You're
you.
more than welcome. Thank you, gents. And catch you all later. Stay crafty.
All the best, guys. Bye.
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 Bye.